somewhere in a box in an old pharmacy or buried in a 19th century medical textbook. There's a list of plants that doctors once relied on constantly. Not folktales, not old wives' remedies. Actual working tools of the medical profession, taught in medical schools, stocked in apothecaries, and prescribed with the same seriousness as any medication you'd get today. And one by one, almost all of them quietly disappeared from modern conversation. Today, we're walking through 13 of them, what they were actually used for, how people prepared and grew them, and why they vanished the moment they stopped being profitable. Before we get into it, a quick note. Everything in this video is shared for educational and historical purposes based on traditional use and published research. This is not medical advice, and none of this should replace guidance from your doctor, especially if you're dealing with a serious health condition. Welcome to Bio Living, where we help you make your life healthier and better naturally, and we share the knowledge that the media and big pharma would rather keep buried. If you're new here, go ahead and subscribe now, so you don't miss our daily uploads. And any products or affiliate links mentioned in this video will be in the description below. Here's the thing about this list. Every single plant on it was once considered mainstream medicine, not alternative, not fringe, mainstream. Doctors trained in real universities studied these plants, prescribed them, and passed that knowledge down for generations. And the reason they disappeared has almost nothing to do with whether they work. It has everything to do with whether they could be turned into something patentable. Let's start working through them. Number 1 is yarrow. The old name for it is literally the soldier's herb, and it goes back to Greek mythology, where it's said Achilles used it to treat his soldiers' wounds on the battlefield. That's actually where its scientific name, Achillea, comes from. For centuries afterward, yarrow was carried by field medics and battlefield healers. They used it for its reputation for supporting the body during cuts and wounds. All the way through the American Civil War, soldiers reportedly packed the crushed leaves directly onto injuries. Modern analysis has found yarrow contains compounds researchers believe may support the body's natural clotting and healing response. That lines up remarkably well with thousands of years of battlefield use, long before anyone understood the chemistry behind it. If you want to grow it yourself, yarrow is almost absurdly easy. It tolerates poor soil. It needs very little water once established, and it actually prefers to be somewhat neglected. That makes it a great border plant for anyone who wants a low-maintenance, drought-tolerant addition to a garden bed. Number 2 is elderberry. If you've ever bought an elderberry immune syrup at a pharmacy for $15 or $20, you are buying a modern packaged version of something European households made from their own backyard trees for generations. Elderberries are rich in anthocyanins, plant pigments studied for their antioxidant properties. And traditional European medicine used elderberry syrup constantly during cold winter months. It was often simmered slowly on the stove with honey and warming spices like clove and ginger. The compound got noticed by science. The whole berry and the tree that grows it for free got quietly left out of the story. One important note here, the raw berries and other parts of the elder tree should never be eaten uncooked. They need to be properly cooked first, which is exactly why traditional preparation always involved simmering rather than eating them straight off the branch. Number 3 is dandelion, the plant most of us spend money spraying out of our lawns every spring. 19th century apothecaries sold dried dandelion root as a premium liver and kidney tonic, and the whole plant was considered valuable enough that entire cookbooks were written around using its leaves, roots, and even the flowers. It contains inulin and bitter compounds that research suggests may support healthy digestion and mild fluid balance. It offers an entire plant matrix, rather than a single isolated molecule. The irony here is hard to miss. We pay to kill this plant, then we pay again for supplements that try to imitate what it already does naturally, when the exact same root is sitting in the yard, free, waiting to be dug up with nothing more than a garden fork. Number 4 is plantain leaf, not the banana-looking plantain, but the low, flat-leafed weed that grows in sidewalk cracks and lawns everywhere. Old-timers called it the Band-Aid plant because crushing the leaf and applying it directly to a scrape or bug bite was common practice for generations. Sometimes it was chewed briefly to release its natural juices before being pressed onto the skin. It contains compounds studied for their soothing effect on skin, and pioneers relied on it constantly, simply because it grew everywhere they walked. It followed settlers so persistently across North America that Native American communities actually nicknamed it white man's footprint, since it seemed to spring up wherever European settlers traveled. Number 5 is burdock root, a plant most people only know as the annoying burrs that stick to their socks on a hike. Traditional herbalists across Europe and Asia used burdock root as what they called a blood-purifying tonic. It was typically prepared as a simmered tea or added into soups the way you might use a potato or carrot. Modern nutritional analysis shows it's rich in inulin fiber and antioxidant compounds, nutrients that may support the body's natural detoxification pathways, working through the liver and digestive system rather than doing anything mystical. In fact, burdock root is still a common vegetable in Japanese cooking today, sold under the name gobo, which shows just how differently this plant is treated depending on which side of the world you're standing on. Number 6 is mullein, sometimes nicknamed cowboy toilet paper because of its famously soft, fuzzy leaves. But long before that nickname, mullein was one of the most widely used respiratory support herbs in traditional Western medicine. It was typically prepared as a tea or smoked in small amounts to support the lungs. Research has looked at its mucilage content, the same slippery plant compound found in several herbs on this list, which appears to have a soothing effect on irritated tissue. Mullein grows as a tall, silvery stalk that can reach over 6 feet, and it thrives in poor, rocky soil where almost nothing else will grow, which is exactly why it became such a common roadside and pasture plant across both Europe and North America. Now, here's something worth pausing on. Notice how many of these plants keep showing up in the exact same era, the exact same countries, and often the exact same doctor's handwritten notes. This isn't 13 unrelated coincidences. This is what an entire working medical system looked like before it got replaced piece by piece with something more profitable. If you're someone who's ever looked at a monthly pharmacy bill and wondered what you're actually paying for versus what nature already provides for free, this is exactly why we put together our complete research guide, The Natural Pharmacy. It's a full breakdown of natural approaches over a 100-day program, backed by sources and research, just like everything we're covering in this video. The link and our website are both in the description below. It's worth checking out if any of this is resonating with you so far. Let's keep going. Number 7 is calendula, the bright orange marigold you've probably seen in flower beds, without realizing it had any medicinal history at all. Calendula was one of the most common skin-healing herbs in traditional European medicine, usually prepared as an infused oil or salve, and it was reportedly used in field hospitals during the American Civil War to help dress wounds when other supplies ran short. It contains flavonoids and carotenoids that research suggests may support skin's natural healing response, and it was a staple in field hospitals well into the 20th century, before synthetic creams took over the shelf space. Calendula is also one of the easiest flowers a beginner gardener can grow. It tolerates poor soil and blooms continuously from early summer straight through the first frost. Number 8 is comfrey, sometimes called knit bone, a nickname that alone tells you everything about how it was used. For 2,000 years, comfrey was the go-to plant for supporting bone and tissue recovery, typically applied as a poultice made from the mashed root or leaves wrapped in cloth. It contains a compound called allantoin, which studies suggest may support skin cell turnover, along with natural mucilage that may aid how the body interacts with it topically. It's a plant almost every European household garden used to grow deliberately, right up until it fell out of medical fashion. And today, it's more often used topically rather than taken internally, since traditional practice always emphasized careful, short-term, external use. Number 9 is slippery elm, a tree bark that Native American communities and later European settlers relied on constantly for soothing the throat and digestive tract. The inner bark contains a thick, gel-like mucilage, and it was such a trusted remedy that it was an official listing in the United States Pharmacopoeia for decades, meaning it was recognized as legitimate medicine by the same governing body that now oversees pharmaceutical drugs. It quietly got removed from that list once cheaper, patentable alternatives became available. And today, the powdered bark is still occasionally used the traditional way, mixed with warm water into a soothing gruel. Number 10 is red clover, the purple flowering plant you've probably walked past in a field without a second thought. Traditional herbalists used red clover as what they called a blood tonic, particularly for women's health, and it's one of the richest natural sources of isoflavones, plant compounds that have been studied for their role in hormone-related research. It was common enough that entire folk medicine systems built specific seasonal harvesting rituals around it, often gathered in early summer when the blossoms were at their fullest and dried for use throughout the colder months. Number 11 is lavender, which most people today only think of as a candle scent, not a medicine. But traditional Mediterranean and European medicine used lavender extensively for calming the nervous system, usually as a tea an infused oil, or simply inhaled from a sachet placed near a pillow. Research has studied linalool, one of lavender's primary compounds, for its calming interaction with the nervous system, which is a very similar mechanism to how some modern calming medications work, just delivered through an entire plant instead of an isolated synthetic molecule. Lavender is also famously drought-tolerant and loves poor, well-drained soil, making it one of the lowest maintenance plants a homesteader can add to a garden bed. Number 12 is marshmallow root. And yes, the fluffy white candy was originally made from this actual plant before manufacturers replaced it with gelatin and sugar. The root contains an extremely high concentration of mucilage, and it was traditionally used to soothe the throat and digestive tract, working through a purely physical, coating mechanism rather than a chemical one. It's a rare case where you can actually trace the exact moment a real medicinal plant got turned into a candy and then quietly forgotten as medicine entirely, with the modern marshmallow keeping only the name and none of the actual plant. Number 13, closing out our list, is cleavers, sometimes called sticky willy because of how the plant clings to clothing and fur with its tiny hooked hairs. Cleavers was traditionally used each spring as what old herbalists called a tonic for the lymphatic system, typically prepared as a fresh juice or tea. It's rich in trace minerals, and it was often the very first plant harvested each year in traditional seasonal wellness practices, marking the transition from winter recovery into spring renewal. And it still grows wild along fences, hedgerows, and shaded garden edges across much of the world today, completely ignored by almost everyone who walks past it. So there's your 13. And if you made it this far, you've probably noticed the same pattern repeating across every single one of these plants. Each one had documented mainstream medical use. Each one worked through identifiable plant compounds that modern science can actually explain. And each one disappeared from common knowledge not because it stopped working, but because none of them could be patented, trademarked, or sold at pharmaceutical markup. That's really the pattern behind almost everything we cover on this channel. Willow bark gave us aspirin, then got replaced by the synthetic version once that could be patented. Chamomile works on some of the same pathways as modern calming medications, yet gets treated like a bedtime story instead of real botany. Now you've got 13 more examples sitting in the exact same category, growing quietly in gardens, ditches, roadsides, and sidewalk cracks all around you. Once you start seeing this pattern, you can't really unsee it. That flowering weed in your yard, that tree bark you've walked past 100 times, that fuzzy-leafed plant growing along the fence line. All of it may have once been considered legitimate medicine taught in real medical schools, before an entire industry decided free things don't fit a business model. And the wildest part is that most of these 13 plants are probably growing within walking distance of wherever you're sitting right now. That's the whole point of this channel, not to tell you to throw out your medications or skip your doctor, but to help you understand that nature ran its own working pharmacy for thousands of years before pill bottles and patents ever existed. And a surprising amount of that knowledge is still growing right outside your door, waiting to be remembered. If plant history like this fascinates you the way it fascinates us, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our next deep dive, because we've got a lot more forgotten plants coming. One last reminder before you go. This video is for educational purposes only, based on historical use and published research. This is not medical advice. This is just our deep research with sources. So if you have a major health issue, please consult a doctor before making any changes to your health routine.